Okay, this video is a book review, and this is the book right here. It's called Evidence-Based Guide to Kidney and Renal Diets. The author's name is Lee Hull. He's the same guy who had previously wrote a big book called Stopping Kidney Disease. He's a real smart guy. He's not a healthcare educated guy, but his background was he had kidney failure himself a long time ago, something like 20 years ago. And in order to save his own kidneys, he started studying what causes kidney failure, became a real expert on it. And I think it's a great book. So here's the cover of it, Evidence-Based Guide. It's real cheap. It's only like about $8 is the cost, and it can save a kidney patient's life. So I got the pros and the cons here. I'd rate it 9 out of 10 stars. I think every internal medicine doctor and nephrology doctor should read it. Any patient who's got kidney problems should read it. And he tells the truth. Your neurons don't grow back. So what you need to do is lower their workload so they don't just go into overdrive, be overworked, and fail on you. The goal of the book is to show you how to improve your kidney function labs, like your BUN and your GFR, blood urea nitrogen and glomerular filtration rate. When a young adult, with optimal kidney function, they'll have a GFR of about 100 with a million neurons. GFR of 60 corresponds to about 600,000 neurons. GFR of 30 to about 300,000 neurons, and then you go on dialysis when you're at 10,000. So the point is, with a typical patient, they're not aware they have serious kidney failure until they have a GFR of around 30, and then they are totally scared that they're going to end up on dialysis. So that's where a lot of patients, all of a sudden get the urgent desire to read a book like this. Kidney failure is super common. I see it all day long, every day. So basically, the average patient with chronic kidney disease, due to the usual suspects, which means obesity, hypertension, and diabetes, and atherosclerosis, they get worsening kidney function by about 3 to 10% a year, or even faster than that. So the real goal is to slow it down to less than 3% drop in GFR every year. I got the page numbers on here from the book if anybody wants them. Okay. The recommended daily allowance for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. A low protein diet is typically in the range of about 0.6 grams of protein per day, but low protein diets by themselves don't really do much. So you want something that's actually more strict than that. And typically it's going to be a very low protein diet. Once you say very, you basically cut in half the amount of protein from a low protein diet. So if low protein diet was 0.6, a very low protein diet would be about 0.3 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. So in a 70 kilogram man, that would be about 21 grams per day of protein, which is about 4.2% of calories. So it's very low calories. I mean, these numbers sound kind of like Kempner's numbers, Walter Kempner's numbers for protein restriction with his kidney failure patients. This author, Lee Hull, also recommends something called keto acid analog. So a keto acid analog means, let's say you take an amino acid or an essential amino acid and you remove the nitrogen on it. So you've got the carbon skeleton, and the body can potentially work really well with that, but you don't have the nitrogen on it. You can get a nitrogen from somewhere else a lot of times. He also says you should check your baseline BUN and glomerular filtration rate, then make a change in your diet and recheck your labs 30 days later and see if you've gotten improvement. He emphasizes treatment of root causes, and I thought that was great. Basically, what you want, the main causes of kidney failure are diabetes, hypertension, and obesity, and atherosclerosis. So you want to reverse obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and atherosclerosis. And how do you do that? It's obvious: a low-fat, vegan diet with no oils. He also recommended avoid supplements unless specifically recommended by a nephrologist. He said you got to watch out for polypharmacy. That's real common. Lots of patients have tons of drugs. So all of those things were good. In fact, they were great. Okay. Now I got some criticisms of the book. First of all, he's biased towards promoting keto acid. He maybe sells them or something. So I thought he overdid it a little bit on his recommendations of keto acids. He doesn't mention Walter Kempner. Well, Walter Kempner is the whole pioneer of this dietary treatment of kidney failure. Back in his day, there was no dialysis. Dialysis didn't become widely available until like the mid-1970s. So to not mention Walter Kempner was a big oversight. And he had incredibly good results for treating obesity, hypertension, and diabetes and atherosclerosis. He doesn't mention Richard Moore. He's the guy who wrote the High Blood Pressure Solution book, and he was fantastic for explaining how sodium contributes to hypertension. And Kempner dramatically lowered sodium. He lowered sodium, to as low as 150 milligrams per day. That's really low. Okay, walking native population might be somewhere in the ballpark of 200 to 500 milligrams per day. He doesn't mention Roy Taylor, who reversed diabetes with diet and shown that was easy to do. He doesn't mention Caldwell-Esselstyn, who showed reversal of coronary artery disease, atherosclerosis, in a big definitive way. He doesn't show Dr. John McDougall, who cured lots of autoimmune diseases in other patients with kidney dysfunction. So he doesn't really go through the big pioneers in the history of improving kidney function. He recommends limiting sodium to about 1,500 milligrams a day, which is more than, there's sort of a famous guy on the internet, Sean Hashmi, who's a nephrologist, and he's pretty good. He recommends only going to 2,000 milligrams per day, and this guy recommends a little more than that, 1,500, but you can go much lower than that. Like I said, Kempner was 10 times lower than that. Kempner was recommending 150 milligrams per day, but when you get down to 150 milligrams per day of sodium, you got to watch that patient carefully and check labs on them. With higher numbers, you don't. Like in the ballpark of 500, like a normal person who doesn't add salt to their food can get something around that range potentially. No mention about some more of the detailed effects of sodium, how it gets people to overeat and become fat. It's a vasoconstrictor, narrowing arteries. That's bad for the kidney. It causes hypertension as well. It contributes to causing diabetes because of the overeating, also because of the vasoconstriction, which will decrease what insulin can do, and insulin's access to the skeletal muscle tissue, because it's vasoconstricted. It can't get in there. It has a slightly prothrombotic effect by activation of platelets. The sodium chloride of the salt can displace bicarbonate from the blood and contribute to metabolic acidosis. So all of these things are working against kidney function, having overeated fat patients, hypertension, vasoconstriction, diabetes, prothrombotic blood. All those things are, harmful. The Kempner diet was only 4.1 calories from protein, kind of like our very low protein diet, about 2% from fat, 96% from carbohydrate. He really made no mention in the book about reducing dietary fat, virtually none. And he didn't insist on 100% vegan with no oils. He just said a plant-based diet. He should be saying 100% vegan. So he wimped out a little. I don't think he knows that much about nutrition. But overall, is it a great book? Yeah, it's still a great book, and I think he could save a lot of patients' lives with this, keep them off dialysis an extra decade or more. So I think it's highly worth reading. And again, all kidney patients should read it, and all internal medicine-based fields should read it. Hope that's helpful.